back to the Emerald Coast Science Center. My name's Cody, again, if you don't know. Last time we did a lesson on bones, and we're going to kind of go off of that. We went into some birds, and today we're going to be talking about the birds and the different types of beaks that they have, and how the different style of beak forms a function for that specific bird. So it'll be really cool. We have a bunch of different scenarios for birds and how they get their food, and that'll be really fun. But last time we said I was going to do a little experiment. This lasted about a whole week. Remember, it's the vinegar and the chicken bones. So again, what we said that was going to happen is we said that bones are made out of primarily two compounds, right? We have the collagen, which gives it the structure, forms the framework of the bone, and then we have the sodium or the calcium bicarbonate, or the calcium carbonate that fills in on that collagen to give it the strength, right? So that calcium carbonate is going to dissolve in the vinegar, right? And so hopefully the bones will be a little bit flimsy. It's going to stink a lot because vinegar does not smell good at all. I'm going to grab some of these bones. So if you look right here, you can see this bone. I'm going to try and bend it. Yeah, look at that. So the middle part is not dissolved all the way, but you can see how the vinegar is all inside that bone and it's real bendy. Let me get a little bit closer. So all that calcium is dissolved and the bones give it a nice, cool bend to it. So that shows you what the bones are primarily composed of, right? Which is pretty cool. And then if we leave those in there for a little bit longer, it'll probably dissolve a little bit more. I kind of got the ball running a little bit late on it, so all the calcium probably didn't get to dissolve all the way. But that's okay. But let's go ahead and get started on the different types of beaks and their functions, right? So we talked about the blue heron last time, right? We said the blue heron, we have some here in Florida, right? And so what they're going to be doing is they're going to be picking up fish like that right on the top of the water. And so right here I have a little scenario. I have some floating styrofoam balls, some foam balls, and those will kind of simulate the fish near the top of the water, right? So some fish need to be close to the surface of the water. And then I also have a clay fish at the very bottom that's sunk down to the bottom, and we're going to try and get that fish as well. So what you can use here to simulate the beak is you can use chopsticks. Right here I have two pencils, right? I use them like chopsticks. And so what the bird does whenever it's swooping down is it's going to swoop down, pick up that fish, and then it's going to swallow it whole, right? And so with a lot of birds, you might be thinking, if it's going to swallow it whole, how is it going to be able to break it up, right? And so when a bird eats something, so say the blue heron picks up his fish on top of the water, he's going to bring it down, he's going to swallow it, it's going to go down his esophagus, right? So we have an esophagus tube. It's going to travel down that tube into what is called a crop. And so a crop is kind of a place to store all that excess food that it has. And then it has something underneath the crop called a gizzard. And that gizzard is used to grind up all sorts of stuff. It's got muscles in there that are moving, and it's going to grind it up. But something that's unique that birds do is you might see a bird eating some sand or picking up some stones. And they're actually swallowing those stones. And what they do is those stones and sand and stuff will go into the gizzard. And whenever it's moving around, whenever those muscles are moving, it causes it to kind of turn into a grinder. And that's going to help break down the food even more. So birds have crops to store the food, and then gizzards to break down. So we chew our food to mechanically break it down, right? But birds are going to just swallow it whole, and they're going to break it down inside their body with that gizzard, which is pretty cool. So yeah, we have the blue heron. He's going to be picking up the fish right on top of the water. And this is an activity you can kind of do at home. So we want to make sure that you're able to do this at home to kind of show the kiddos how different birds are special in their own way, right? Yeah, and then we have the fish at the very bottom, right? So let me try and get it to a point where you can see it a little bit better. Remember what I said about blue herons, if they need to be really quick and they can't grab onto it because it's really fast? Remember what I said they could do? I said they could stab it, right? Alright, so I'm going to stab the fish at the bottom, right? So he's going around, the fish is too fast for him. He can't get it. He's going to stab it. Oh, stab it. Stab it like that. There you go. And then he's going to be able to pull it off of him and then swallow it whole, right? So that blue heron's got a really, really sharp beak so it can impale his food and eat it for later. And then we can move over here. So we passed the blue herons. The blue herons are really cool. They're really pretty birds. And then we can move over to the birds like the pigeons. We have the pigeons, and then we have sandpipers. So these are birds that are going to be kind of, here they're on the shoreline, right? We have a lot of pigeons on the shorelines. And so what they're going to do is, we can use some tweezers for this, right? So they're going to be shifting all through the sand, right? And in the sand I have pipe cleaners. I cut some pipe cleaner, and they can shift around looking for some birds. They can look for insects in the grassy coastal areas, right? Where there's the dunes. And then they can also, if they get the chance, so we have some bivalves right here, right? So I have a bivalve shell, it's a little clam. So if they get a chance, you might see some birds that are staying near the coastline, right? Staying near the water when it pulls up, because that's when all those crustaceans, all those mollusks and stuff, they're gonna come up to the shore, right? When they get tossed over into the water, and so they're gonna be looking for them, right? And so whenever that clam opens his mouth to try and stick his little foot, that's what they call it. Whenever a clam sticks that little tongue-looking thing out, it's called the foot. And that helps him move around. And so he'll stick that foot out to try and dig down into the ground. And if that bird can reach and grab that foot by the time before he gets into the sand, that clam's no good. That bird's gonna eat him, right? So that bird can get down into those bivalves if he gets the chance, if he's quick enough. And then also in like shells with like hermit crabs, those holes are all constantly there, right? So they could dig that beak down into the hole to pull out a hermit crab or something like that too. So yeah, you could use the tweezers to pick up the insects, whatever they want to eat. And this is a good activity to use, especially if you have more than one kid. You can kind of see who's the best bird at catching their food, right? You can see who's the quickest and who can get the most food in a certain amount of time, right? So it's a cool little game you can play as well. So we talked about the heron eating the fish on top of the water. We have the pigeons and the sandpipers, the sanderlings. They're all scurrying around the sand looking for insects, stuff like that. We have some seed-eating birds, right? So parrots are seed-eating birds. We have some other ones like finches, right? And so what we're going to use for these are pliers. So we're going to use these pliers to show how strong the beaks are. So you need a real strong, short beak in order to break down the seeds, right? So I can pick up a seed right here. You gotta be very patient. So I can pick up a seed right here, and I can bite it like that, right? So the bird's beak is super strong if it's really short, and they can use it like pliers to bite down onto the seed and then eat the seed after, right? Which is pretty cool. And so after this, a good thing to do after you're done doing this exercise or after you're done watching this video is you can go online and look at different bird beaks. You can even look up crazy bird beaks. And then you can try and guess what type of food they eat based on the shape of their beaks, which is pretty interesting because there's all sorts of different shapes and sizes of beaks. And the size has a pretty big impact on like what they're able to eat and how they're going to survive, right? So the finches and the parrots, the macaws, they can eat the seeds and stuff like that. They have a really strong, short beak. And then we have the woodpecker, right? So the woodpecker is super cool. They're constantly hitting their head onto the wood, right? They're constantly digging into that wood, trying to get it deep. They have a really sharp beak, and it's specifically made to dig into the wood really easily. And people think all the time, like, well, how are they not getting headaches, right? They're hitting that wood all the time. We get a headache from hitting our head, right? Yeah, I would for sure. Something that's really cool is their tongues can wrap around their skulls. So, well, their tongues do wrap around their skulls. So they have their tongues that stick out, and they will wrap around their head like that. And it'll kind of form like a little cushion, a shock absorption for their head whenever they're hitting on the wood, right? So humans can only take about 100 times worth the gravity impact. Woodpeckers, when they're hitting the wood, it's at least 1,000 times of the force of gravity when they're hitting the wood like that with their head. So they can withstand a lot more force than humans can. which is crazy because they're just so much smaller, right? So that's pretty cool. And so here, I have some clay, and I put some chocolate sprinkles in there so you can see it. I made sure I got white clay so you can see that. And this is gonna, the clay is gonna resemble the wood, right? And so also what you could do is you can kind of cover some of the sprinkles or whatever you'd like to use for your insects, and kind of cover it in there. And the bird's beak is specifically made to break apart the wood chips, right? And so they could break apart the wood chips, and then they'd be able to grab their insects that they found in there, and they're really good at finding them. They can almost always sense when there's one underneath, which is really cool. And then after the woodpeckers, we got some owls, pheasants. What's something special about those that I said? If you were paying attention to the last video I did when I talked about them, I said that they have that curved beak, right? So that curved beak is to tear meat off, right? And so you can see I have the owl here that I showed last time, and then I have a pheasant right here. He's got a little curved beak too that he can use. And so something that can resemble them tearing the meat is you can grab cotton balls, right? And so you can see, if you had a bunch of kids, you can see who's the best meat-eating bird, who's the best predatory bird, and they can try and find these cotton balls and then take the tweezers, and then whatever a bird's going to eat, he's going to have his talon down on the food, right? And he's going to be ripping the meat off like this, right? And so you could use the cotton ball to simulate a mouse maybe, and then the tweezers to simulate an owl eating the food, right? So that's pretty cool. We have an owl right here, we got that pheasant. Some other examples are hawks, right? Big hawks that are going to come down. They have those big sharp talons to grab onto you and hold you down, and then they're going to just be tearing that meat off, right? If you're a mouse or a rabbit or something like that. Yeah, and so the next one I'm going to talk about is a pelican, okay? And so pelicans are really cool because they're going to scoop down the fish and stuff that are near the surface of the water, kind of like the heron was getting the fish on the surface of the water, but this time he's going to scoop it. And so some birds that do that are like albatrosses. Albatrosses will go on the surface of the water and they'll scoop up a lot of food and then they'll swallow it. But you would think if they're going to scoop up in the water, their mouth's going to be full of water, right? And you don't want to drink seawater. So something that they do is you could use like a pasta spoon if you wanted to simulate it that way to show how the water kind of pours out of the spoon. But right here I have, to make it a little bit more realistic, I have a normal spoon, right? So I have a normal spoon, and that spoon can pick up things, but I still have all that water in there, right? All that water is still in there. And so something that I wanted to do is I have this spatula right here to kind of act as the top bill, right? So we got that spoon right here, that's the bottom part of the bill, and then the spatula to close down onto it. And so what pelicans do in particular is they'll go down, and so I'll put it right here so we can all see it a little bit better. So what pelicans will do is they'll go down, scoop all this water, and try and capture the fish. So if you look here, I got that fish in there, but I got a lot of water in there too, right? And so what pelicans will do is they'll just tip their beaks down a little bit, and they'll barely open their mouths. They'll barely open their mouths just like that to allow that water to escape. They'll tilt it really any way they can. And then they'll swallow it, right? They'll tilt it back and they'll swallow the fish whole where the gizzard can break it down, right? So that's super cool. This is a super interesting way to show the pelican's beak, how it can scoop down the fish and stuff like that, which is pretty interesting. And then another bird I wanted to talk to you is, it's kind of hard to show than the simulation of them eating. I was thinking you could use a straw, but a straw is not realistic on how to show them because, okay, so I'm going to talk about a hummingbird, right? So a lot of people think whenever they dip down into the flower to drink the nectar, they can also drink tree sap, stuff like that. A lot of the time they think that they're sucking like a straw. They're using their beaks to suck like a straw. But actually what they're doing, so I have a crude drawing right here that I did, right? But they have the flower right here, and at the bottom is where the nectar is going to be, right? That's where the fluid, the sweet sugar water is going to be for them to drink. And what they have is that they have a long, long beak, right? And their tongue is actually twice the size. So their tongue can actually shoot out double past its beak, which is really cool. And their tongue has a super cool shape. So a lot of times they think that they're just sucking with the beak, but they're not. They're just going to go into the flower, they're going to kind of tilt back, and they have a tongue that's shaped like two troves, right? So like two big spoons kind of, and it goes all the way down. And so what's going to happen is whenever the hummingbird sticks its beak into the flower, it's going to tilt back a little bit like that to allow the nectar, the sugar water, to go down those troves, right? To allow it to enter the body for that hummingbird, which is super cool. And so like the longer the beak, it's more able to reach deep down into deeper flowers, right? And so if you have an area with a bunch of flowers that are really long like this, and then at the bottom, like it's is where the nectar is. If there's an island, say if there's an island, and it's only these flowers, only these super long flowers, you're not going to have any hummingbirds with really small beaks that are able to reach down into it because they're not going to be able to reach the nectar, right? The only birds you're going to be able to see are the ones that have really long beaks that can reach all the way down. And so it's cool because the size of their beak determines how well they're going to be able to survive in an environment like that. So that was something that they learned when they were looking at the Galapagos Islands, right? They saw that only a certain amount of birds with a certain amount of beaks were able to eat the vegetation and stuff like that. The seeds, if they had that really dense, short beak, they were only able to eat seeds right off that island. And so it really comes to show that each bird is different. Each bird has something special about it, and that the certain shape of the beak determines its function and how it can, how the different stuff it eats, right? So something that I encourage y'all to do after this, after you watch this video, is to go online and look at a bunch of different cool bird beaks, right? And then after that, try and guess what type of food it eats. And that'll be a cool activity you can do to kind of learn the new types of beaks that there are, because there's a bunch of different kinds, right? So coming up in the next few days, we're going to have the shutdown, right? And so we're going to be doing our best to making sure that we're still going to be able to give content out to y'all. We are going to take a lot of the stuff home, so we're not going to be able to be coming to the Science Center too much, and we're going to be, all the educators are going to do their best to take all of the equipment home so that we can still be making videos for y'all. I know I'm going to be thinking of some cool experiments for me to do for y'all. So just stay tuned for that. Make sure to follow us on our Facebook page. What's our Instagram page? What is it called? You know?
It's EC Science Center. So.
EC Science Center. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook just so you can stay connected, because we're going to be still posting content even with this shutdown. We're still going.